What gets to me, I think the easy answer for like hypocrisy and faith is we can just talk about Athens if we want, of people who like claim that, since we're in Georgia in the South, like most people claim that they're Christian in the Bible Belt, but their words are different than their actions. They might go out downtown, party scene, and get drunk or do things like that, and it hurts any witness that a real believer, I think, in Christ is and represents, because actions speak louder than words, and they mean a lot more for someone to actually do something than to say they believe in something and not.
I wouldn't really call myself much of a believer in high school, but when I was in high school, part of the reason I didn't go to church was because there were people I knew who I didn't like the things that they did in general. I just thought I just thought they were kind of mean and not great people, and they would be the same people that would show up at church, and I was like, oh man, that actually prevented me from going to church. Hypocrisy with Christianity that happens on kind of the political stage, kind of like what you see on TV, and people who kind of champion Christ, but then they're making public decisions that don't reflect that. I think more the thing that bothers me is that you're doing it on the biggest stage, and there's a lot, you take on a lot of responsibility when you're in political office or when you're, publicly in the media in front of everyone. So my dad, when we hang out with our neighbors, my dad, because he's a pastor, when guys, men talk about their vocations, his ministry and his vocation are the same thing. So when people say, oh, what do you do? He's like, I'm pastor, and then immediately, oh, I know, so it's I think if the church, if believers in general acted, if they looked more like Christ, then hopefully you wouldn't have a reaction like that,
There are going to be some bad people in churches and people who are hypocritical, but a lot of them are broken and are hurting too. But just realizing that everybody wasn't a hypocrite was huge, and so step back into church and in a community of believers. But it was a roller coaster ride, and it was difficult.
At what point do you think someone becomes a hypocrite? Do you have to be actively preaching, I'm not doing things, and then doing those exact things? Or you think of someone, oh man, that guy kind of crossed the line. Or you were talking about people who were authentic and weren't. I'm just all of us are making mistakes daily. So at what point are you a hypocrite,
Yeah, this is a good question. In a way, I think I was a hypocrite for professing one thing, but not doing it and still acting in sin. But the fact of the matter is nobody's perfect. And so I think in every way, or not in every way, but everybody in some way is a bit of a hypocrite. But I guess where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line when you start affecting other people by being a hypocrite, or
I think you'll be familiar with this, but it's acknowledging that I'm not perfect. I'm not going to meet the standard that God has set for me. But the fact, what we believe is that Jesus came down and reached that standard for us, right? He was able to do what we couldn't. And so I would say that people who are actively continuing to do the wrong thing, it's evidence of a problem with their heart. And that is, in a way, between them and God. But someone who really understands the gospel and has experienced a change of heart, I would hope that would kind of manifest itself in the way that they live their life, And part of that is saying, I'm going to make mistakes. So my parents, obviously my dad's a pastor and my mom works in the church, so my parents were there every week. And I think I made up excuses for not going to the youth part of the church, but the main reason was that, and I told my youth pastor this, but I had a problem with the guys who were there. I just didn't think they were great guys. For me personally, I'd say that I know those guys now, and part of my journey has been coming to college and being like, oh man, like I was kind of the worst in high school, you know, like that, I was like, oh shoot, I was exactly one of those guys too. I just didn't like them. I think for me though, it's like all of that stuff in me was like really, I just like kind of pushed it inside. So it was like my heart, I was, you know, I had jealousy, I had anger, bitterness, and like I really was kind of self-centered. Mine was just all like stuffed on the inside. And so I called it out in all these people I saw. And then I didn't realize till later, like, oh man, you know, actually on the inside, I looked exactly like we were all the same thing, so.
You got a log in your eye.
Exactly, so I mean, it did keep me away from Christian community for a few years, so.
How did you come back in?
I met a person who was the most probably authentically like living person. I met a guy named Matthew Lynch, and just a really extraordinary guy. Everything he did was kind of defined by love, and he couldn't really talk about anything without talking about how much he loved God or loved people, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but sign me up for this.
Just because that there are people like that doesn't mean that everybody's like that. I mean, I could have chosen to hold on to my bitterness instead of, and essentially doing something similar to them and holding unforgiveness to them and realizing that I have been forgiven of so much. Who am I to not forgive others? And so that took moving on from that, and now I think I like to think that I have a big stand like against hypocrites, and specifically those in the church, because it's affected me. And so going from place to place, just having these conversations. I got a haircut, not this haircut, but a different one earlier, and just talked the one before this to my hairdresser, who ended up sharing about how she was hurt by people in the church and by her pastor specifically. And so I'm just getting to look people in the eye who have been hurt by people who claim, at least like Christ for my shoes. I'm so sorry that happened to you, and that you did not deserve that, and that's not how Christ would have done it. It's not how he would have treated you, and it's not the way that he cares about you.
I think that when dealing with hypocrisy, I think that first, right, we're reminded about that verse about the plank in our own eye, and I think you do want to be cognizant of, I am someone who makes mistakes all the time, even in my best efforts to become like Jesus. So with that running in the background, I feel like you're able to give grace. But at the same time, I think when it comes to hypocrisy, I think I'm reminded of, I don't remember, I think it was Jesus who says this, but that, you know, when a brother is sinning, that you go to them kind of a one-on-one. Because I'm thinking of like the big, like public people who are claiming Christ and then doing really bad stuff. And it's kind of like, I don't want to be super public in my almost like bringing them down. Like the best way to do it is probably to talk one-on-one as much as possible, you know. And I feel like people are the most responsive to those types of conversations too, instead of like, you know, megaphones, like shouting across the river to each other.